Dr. Go currently serves as the program officer for bioenergy at IRENA. And prior to this, he's held various roles in international organizations, research institutions, and government agencies, and worked on programs and projects related to sustainable bioresources and bioeconomy. Dr. Go, floor is all yours. I would also like to highlight that he's a part of the expert committee of the Global Biofuels Alliance that is focused on supporting the country of Mauritius in developing a biofuels focused policy framework. Over to you, Mr. Go. Thank you. I can see your screen, but it's not in the slide sharing mode.
Yeah,
Yes, you can see it now. Thank you.
great. So I hope you can hear me well. Thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Chun, currently serving as a Program Officer for Bioenergy at International Renewable Energy Agency, ARENA. So in this session, we will explore how bio-based SAF could play a role in decarbonizing aviation in Southeast Asia, which is a region rich in agricultural resources while growing rapidly. We will draw insights from our recent report on sustainable aviation fuels in Southeast Asia, a regional perspective on bio-based solutions. The report is rather comprehensive, covering feedstock, techno-economic analysis, and also policy discussion. However, due to the time constraint, today we will focus only on the feedstock sourcing. Well, let's begin by setting the scene. Before we dive into the report, let me bring in a quick insight from another ARENA study with the title Decarbonizing Hard-to-Abate Sectors with Renewables. There's a compact table in this report that helps to set the stage. Now, as you can see here, it shows different options or solutions we have to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors. And this clearly shows why biofuels are in the spotlight when we talk about decarbonizing aviation. Well, aviation is a hard-to-abate sector in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, meaning that it's particularly challenging to decarbonize because the aeroplanes cannot easily plug into renewable electricity or use batteries for long-haul flights. So among all the solutions out there, biofuels emerge as not just technologically ready, but also very relevant and well-suited for aviation, right alongside other difficult sectors like shipping and chemicals. I understand that you are going to have another session on maritime biofuel, which is also very relevant. Well, biofuels offers a drop-in replacement for conventional jet fuel in this case that can reduce life cycle emissions and while all being compatible with existing aircraft engines and also infrastructure. Right, so Southeast Asia has a unique opportunity to become a major player in the SAF industry with its abundant tropical agriculture and biomass resources. However, realizing the potential could be very challenging. It involves navigating a range of technical, economic, and also policy challenges. So the key question is, how much SAF could the region realistically produce? I think Mr. Montero just now already pointed out that feedstock indeed is a key factor here. So to understand how much sustainable aviation fuel Southeast Asia could produce, we need to consider feedstock availability. Sorry. Yeah. Now, this graph shows the technical potential of SAF from residues and waste, agricultural residues, forestry residues, and etc. Considering 100% of full mobilization of all available residues and waste. So at first glance, the region seems to generate enormous quantities of agricultural waste, like rice straw, oil palm biomass, palm oil meal effluent, coconut husk, sugarcane bagasse, you name it. Now, there is also used cooking oil, coal, and also other residues that could be converted into jet fuel. So, theoretically, all these waste and residues could be turned into millions of tons of SAF. But in practice, much of these residues already have uses. They might be returned into fuels as fertilizers, used for animal feed, or even burned for heat and power. So in this report, we further exclude the already used biomass to get a better estimation of feedstock potential, and we call this technical potential. However, we must also consider that collecting and converting these residues is not always economically or logistically easy. There are many other non-technical factors, such as reluctance of the agriculture players to venture into this business due to other more convenient options, such as returning these residues to the soil to recover the nutrients and carbon, or use it for other purposes on site, including conversion to electricity, heat, or biogas. So as such, we are eager to look into a different scenario, perhaps closer to reality, if only half of this potential can be mobilized effectively. And these are represented in the graph here by the light green bars. As you can see, it's about 50% less. So beyond the difficulty in mobilizing these resources from the sites, we also have to consider competitions for these resources for other products. For example, the maritime biofuel that mentioned several times just now. These different demand will likely increase the competition for feedstock in the future. And also we have competitions not only from the energy sectors, but also from, for example, the biochemical sectors and also biogas. For biochemicals, like for example, people may want to produce bioplastics to replace fossil materials, and this requires enormous volume of bio-based feedstock. And when it comes to carbon consideration, right, we also want to reduce carbon. One option is to use biomass, these residues to produce biochar for soil enhancement and also carbon storage. So in short, not all these residues and waste are truly available for jet fuel only, for SAF only, right? When you consider all these competing uses. It's very important to keep this in mind because for IRENA, we focus very much on the long-term and also comprehensive energy transition. So it is important to see how this feedstock being used for different purposes to achieve the most optimum outcome. So we then project this development in different scenarios. So let's say if we compare this with projected demand in the 1.5 degree scenario, which means we achieve a very high degree of decarbonization, which are represented here, the gray dots, if you can see on my slide. Yeah, so in this scenario, we envision a 70% SAF blending in 2050 for aviation. As you can see here, many Southeast Asian countries would still face a gap in meeting their future jet fuel needs. It is clear that for a country like Malaysia, domestic residues and waste would fall short of the 2050 demand. And for countries with large future demand like Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines, unless we can achieve extraordinarily high collection rates, otherwise it's difficult to have enough feedstock for bio-based SAF to fulfill the local demand. And for Indonesia, as you can see here, the country with the largest potential, even reaching 70% SAF target will require a very high percentage of mobilization of available agricultural waste. and residue. So basically collecting every technically available biomass from the field. And that's not very realistic, especially as we have noted some of these materials are not easy to collect or already used elsewhere or maybe used for something else other than just biofuel or biojet fuel. So an important takeaway here is residues and waste can provide a large amount of feedstock for SAF, but probably not all of it. If we are aiming to fully decarbonize the sector and also considering competitions from the other sectors. And if we factor in the immense demand from Singapore, which is also mentioned several times just now by Mr. Montero, things can get even more complicated, right? At the moment, Singapore is already importing new coal from neighboring countries and even from China. So as these countries begin exporting this feedstock to meet Singapore's need, the pressure for the country to achieve its own decarbonization target will become even more challenging. Now we know that relying solely on residues and waste is not a silver bullet for meeting SAF demand in most Southeast Asian countries. And in this situation, it seems that it's unavoidable or very high likelihood to have energy crops come into play if we are talking about high degree of decarbonization. So energy crops refer to plants grown specifically for fuel. If energy crops will be necessary to fill the gap, we have to be careful, and very careful with a huge caveat. The cultivation of these energy crops must be managed with extreme care. Why I say we have to be careful is because we have to focus on overall land use sustainability and also efficiency. So in simpler language, if we're going to plant fields of different crops to make jet fuel, we will have to be careful in choosing the suitable crops that have low impacts to the land, and we can only do it on lands that won't jeopardize food production. And of course, we have to do it on non-forested land. Now, it seems that if you look at this graph based on the FAOStat data, it seems that Southeast Asia does have vast areas of unutilized low-carbon land that could potentially used to cultivate energy crops, like abandoned land or degraded land that are not forested or farmed. So these are represented here in the dark green bars. And if you see the scale of the area of this land, it can be up to millions of hectares. But to map these lands precisely, like partially explicit, and also to ensure that they are truly suitable, is a very tedious task. We have to ensure using this land won't cause not only ecological problems, like the land suitability, water availability, soil suitability, things like that. But we also have to consider the social factors here. The tricky thing here is at the moment, governments don't always have clear data, clear understanding, and proper strategies for this. So clearly, um, if we want to plan toward energy crops, we must have proper understanding of landscape management, land conditions, and also land use dynamics. And we have to be really careful to have a comprehensive approach to ensure that we cover the needs of food, energy, and ecological services. And it basically means that land use planning in a holistic way that cover across the entire landscape. We may even explore linking SAF crop cultivation with restoration and conservation goals, meaning that, for instance, planting energy crops that also help to restore degraded land, or planting in ways that also support biodiversity and local communities. So this is my last slide. It's a summary and it's also a discussion. So one key insight about production potential is that resources are not evenly distributed among countries, at least for the case of Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia is not homogeneous, right? Some nations or some countries have huge land areas and agricultural output like Indonesia, while others are smaller countries like Singapore, but with high demand. So even Malaysia, the country in between, is facing the same resource constraint. And these countries could not be self-reliant for self-supply. And that basically means that cross-border trade and investment will be essential. Meanwhile, Indonesia is positioning itself to be a major producer of biofuel, including SAF. Um, it focuses still very much on palm oil, but it also generates large volumes of agricultural residues and significant areas where energy crops could be grown. Countries like Vietnam, Thailand, and Philippines fall somewhere in between. They have some resources, but probably not enough to meet a high fraction of their future jet fuel demand without imports. So this imbalance, I mean, we are looking for a long term until 2050. Yeah, we are not talking about the demand now, but in the long run. And we will have this imbalance, and it means that we need a regional market for feedstock and SAF. Well, in fact, we have already seen early signs of that, like for example, the case of Singapore, where the big refinery is importing new coal from neighbors. We also see that a planned SAF plant in Thailand also intends to export a lot of its SAF to Japan. It's an export-oriented approach when they develop this SAF industry. Now, a second aspect of when we talk about production potential is deciding who gets the limited feedstock pie. Now, think of it this way. If we have 1,000,000 tons of, say, rice straws, well, we may use it for SAF or biochemicals or biogas or return to the soil or any other applications. So recalling the earlier slide I showed on the hard-to-abate sectors, we know that some sectors are more ready to be decarbonized with electrification, such as road transportation can be decarbonized with electric vehicles in coming decades. However, some sectors will have very limited options, like aviation, because we cannot easily electrify our planes. So we may want to be careful when it comes to allocating bio-based resources to the different sectors. And essentially, decision makers will need to reassess this allocation of feedstock across not only the energy sectors, but also non-energy sectors. Well, it's a delicate balance, right? We don't want to harm one industry at the expense of another. I mean, we don't want to. We want to make sure this allocation is optimum as the energy transition progresses. So how do we align policies so that biomass goes where it brings the greatest decarbonization benefits is something need to be carefully planned. So one option is to incentivize alternative in other sectors, like promoting EVs in ground transport to reduce the sector's need for biofuels so that more biofeedstock can be freed up for aviation and also maritime use. So lastly, while talking about production, we must not forget the human dimension or the social dimension. Biofuel production is not just about tons of feedstock and barrels of fuels. It's about farmers, landowners, and local communities. So in this report, we stress the importance of involving local stakeholders in planning new feedstock projects. If, say, large areas of land are to be used for growing energy crops, how will that impact local livelihoods? Even if we're talking about degraded land, we also have to be careful with environmental sustainability because not all non-forested land is suitable for energy crop. There could be some areas that require more attention when it comes to ecological services and things like that. So we have to be really careful with that. And so the recommendation is that each country will need to tailor very its unique business models. Perhaps community-based collection of residues or other innovative business models to ensure that self-feedstock development is socially feasible and also sustainable, of course. Right. So, in summary, um, Southeast Asia's production potential for SAF is significant but conditional. Countries will need to trade feedstock and fuels in the long run because some will have surpluses and others have deficits. And they will have to plan carefully for feedstock competitions between countries and also between sectors, making sure that as much biomass as possible goes into decarbonizing the hard-to-abate sectors. Well, it's a complex puzzle, but the pieces are on the table. So we have to plan as early as possible with this big picture in mind. That's all for my presentation today. Thank you very much.